Answers to the formative constitutional assessment. Let's go through the vocabulary. First, Shay's Rebellion. Shay's Rebellion is a poor farmer's rebellion in Massachusetts. It showed the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. I'm not going to get into that because we've gone over it extensively, but after Shay's Rebellion, they went back to revise the Articles of Confederation and ended up scrapping them and writing a whole new constitution. And that's the same one that we have today, 225 years later. The Great Compromise was an agreement in between two groups. It was presented by Roger Sherman, and the two groups that were arguing about population representing states in a legislature, or being able to represent states equally. So, of course, some states' populations were much larger, and the smaller states did not like that. The larger states argued through a plan called the Virginia Plan that they should have a unicameral House that would make the laws, and the small states disagree with that. They thought that all states should be represented equally because their population would have less of a say in government. Roger Sherman proposed this Great Compromise and ended up mashing the two plans together, Virginia and New Jersey plans, and it ended up being that there would be two houses, one called the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives would represent states based upon their population. So if you had a larger size population, you would have more say in that house. And another house called the Senate, which represented all states equally. The third vocabulary term is Anti-Federalists. Anti-Federalists are people who opposed the ratification of the Constitution. They did not want a strong central government. Anti-Federalists are, big Anti-Federalists would be George Mason, or another one would be Thomas Jefferson. Amendments. Amendments are simply changes to the Constitution. They're formal changes to the Constitution. Tariffs. Tariffs are taxes on imports and exports. We've been talking about how they wanted to buy the Port of New Orleans in the Louisiana Purchase to avoid taxes on their goods. Taxes make their goods more expensive, and when goods are more expensive, they're less likely to buy them. So tariffs, again, are taxes on imports and exports. Ratification. Ratification is the process of making something approved or formal approval. So if you're talking about ratifying a law, you're talking about making a law from a bill into a law by a formal process. So formal approval. The Virginia Plan. Virginia Plan we already talked about in the Great Compromise. The Virginia Plan was a large states plan that would represent states based upon their population. Small states would not have as much say in a legislature where you make laws. Petition. A petition is a formal request for the government to change. A recent petition was that when Obama was elected, Texas petitioned for removal of themselves into a new country. They collected 30,000 signatures, and their request had to be heard by the White House. The White House disagreed and thought that the Texas would not be allowed to leave the Union and form their own country. Constitutional Convention. Constitutional Convention was where the Constitution was created. It was in Philadelphia, and it was over quite a few hot summer months. And they ended up creating a new Constitution and scrapping the Articles of Confederation, and that was in 1787. James Madison was known as the father of the Constitution. He had many of the political ideas that are now present within the Constitution. He's also the fourth president. Suffrage. Suffrage simply means voting rights. At this particular time, voting rights are only allowed. Voting rights only go to white men who own property. Right before Andrew Jackson's elected, the voting rights change, and then it becomes only white men with or without property. So suffrage is voting rights. Legislative branch. Legislative branch is one of the parts of government out of three that makes the laws. The other two would be the judicial branch and the executive branch. But the legislative branch for the United States is composed of two houses, House of Representatives and the Senate, and they make the laws. 3/5 compromise. 3/5 compromise is a compromise that the large states with slave populations wanted to have in the Constitutional Convention. They argued that a lot of their population, though it was filled with slaves, that population should count for their representation in the House of Representatives. So what they conceded was that not all the slaves would count, but out of 5, 3 of them would count towards apportionment and representation in the House of Representatives. Depression. A depression is an economic downturn, and that's what was happening during the time of Shay's Rebellion. It was that there was little money circulating within the United States. Judicial branch is another one of the branches. Judicial branch is another one of the branches of the United States government. It decides whether the laws are constitutional or not. So the laws that Congress makes, they have to follow the Constitution.